This is how different the world was when the last Final Destination installment had come out. This Nintendo Switch did not exist yet. Skyrim was just released for the first time. Netflix was still mailing DVDs out, right? Like in the movie space, the Avengers, there had been no Avengers films yet. The Conjuring universe was still 2 years away from being spawned. Jordan Peele hadn't even started doing Key and Peele yet. There was no such term as elevated horror, like that didn't exist. And I mean, Black Mirror hadn't been released yet. There had been no Black Mirror episodes, which feels like it's done 100 seasons, right? That is how different the world was when Final Destination 5 was released. It feels like two completely different universes. We've been waiting 14 years for this one. And Final Destination Bloodlines just goes to show that Rube Goldberg-inspired deaths are bloody timeless, because I had a pretty good time with this one. Now, huge caveat, I am only reviewing this movie through the lens of the Final Destination series, right? Like, this movie is so specific and it's got such a specific audience, it seems silly to review it like I would, like, oh, let's do Sinners versus Final Destination. Which one should you see? You know, that's crazy. It's the sixth one in a franchise. But for me, it goes Final Destination 1, then tied for second place is Final Destination 2 and Final Destination Bloodlines. That's my rankings, my top rankings for this installment. That's how much I enjoyed myself here. The kills are great. They're comical. They're funny. They're over the top. They're gory. The gore in them is amazing, as it always is in the Final Destination movies. I think this has some of the better kills in the series, or at least it did for me. And, you know, it's perfectly serviceable. It's got a much bigger scope than lots of the Final Destination series, because the inciting incident involves so many people and their lineages, and that could have been a massive problem, right? That could have just made an absolute mess of a movie, like blowing it out by that much. But I really do think that they did pretty well. They nailed the Final Destination feel in this movie, and I do think the second half far exceeds the first half, and that is not including the amazing send-off that they did for Tony Todd, which I will get to in this review. But all in all, I had a pretty damn good time. I had a much better time than I thought I would watching Final Destination Bloodlines. Final Destination Bloodlines follows a college student named Stephanie, played by Caitlin Santajuana, who is experiencing really traumatic nightmares about these really obscure and weird deaths happening to her family members that involve her grandmother Iris. So she decides to travel back to her hometown and work out what the fuck's going on, why is she having these dreams. As she starts digging into the mystery, she finds out that her family have sort of abandoned Iris because of her crazy obsession with the Grim Reaper and death. So Stephanie starts to investigate her family's dark past, and secrets are sort of revealed that put her family members directly in death's crosshairs. And she basically sets apart, like, trying to fix this and save her family. As always, with every installment in this series, it focuses on themes of, like, legacy and fate and the somewhat comedic nature of death, while giving you ample opportunity to strategize with your friends about what death's sleight of hand might be for each kill. And let's be honest, that's really the Final Destination spirit. I thought this movie was a fantastic addition to the Final Destination franchise. The kills in this one are absolutely unreal, and they show you all the gore and gristle, which is, let's be honest, that's what we rock up for in the Final Destination movies. This movie is a lot brighter in tone than the first two installments. If you think back to Final Destination 1 and 2, they're filmed with quite a dark tone. The victims in those movies sort of know they're up against something unsurmountable and unkillable, and you're just trying to watch them survive and fight against this unstoppable force, and it all feels kind of dark and hopeless. This movie skews towards the later installments, where it's a bit brighter. Like, if there's lots of the kills in this take place in a neighborhood setting, and it's quite idyllic. Everyone who is not the characters, like our characters, is having quite a lovely time. You know, you'd actually like to spend time there. There's people kicking the footy, and there's people having barbecues, and it's actually quite lovely. People going for runs and walking their dogs. It's quite a lovely backdrop, and I think the juxtaposition of that backdrop with the absolute atrocities that are occurring on screen gives it quite a comedic feel. And really, I think all the humor worked in this movie, or at least it did for me. Especially when the bits with Richard Harmon's character Eric, he sort of feels like he's got the swagger of like a Shaggy character, except it would be like his vibe's sort of more if Shaggy started hanging out with like low-level Crimson fuck-ups. Like, I really liked his character. And his relationship with his brother, Bobby, who's played by Owen Patrick Joyner, is really good. There's a lot of like playful jabs, but you can tell they love each other, and it really makes you feel for these characters, and you get nervous when they're on screen and you think they might be in danger. And that relationship I really loved, and I think it's one of the best things about this film. And like I said, the kills are almost all great, right? The best Final Destination kills feel like you're playing a Hitman game. You sit there and you survey what's going on, and you think, okay, there's an angry dog over there barking that's about to snap off its chain. There is a hornet's nest, you know, floating above a tree with a barbecue under it. Someone spilled a tub of ice next to the wood chipper, you know, and you try to work out, okay, how is Death going to go about this? How would you strategize it? If I was Death, how would I do it? And they sort of put you in the writer's chair and sort of make you think about, how would you do this kill? And then you get to see it play out like a minute later and work out if you're right or not. That is the fun of the Final Destination franchise, at least it is for me. And that does this. You get to try and predict, you get plenty of opportunities to try and predict Death's weapon of choice with lots of red herrings thrown in, and it's really good. One of the best things this movie does, though, is it gives us a really great send-off to horror icon Tony Todd, right? Tony Todd has been such a big part of the horror community since the 90s, and a huge part of the Final Destination series, playing William Bloodworth. And I think we all felt it last year when we lost him. You know, when any celebrity dies that you like, or you like their stuff, you sort of feel it. But with Tony Todd, he's a fucking icon. He's an icon. And this movie they did it really well. They did his final scene so perfectly and deftly. It showed you how important he was to the series, but they also give you the context of why. Like, they wrapped up all the parts. Why was he in the series? What were his motives? Because there's a lot of fan theories about what his character William Bloodworth was actually, who they really were, and what were their motives. It wraps it all up beautifully. There's even a little bit of an Easter egg to how the horror community thinks of Tony Todd, because the characters say stuff and react to Tony Todd's character like we do, like the reviews do. They talk about how charismatic he is and how you kind of just trust him for no reason. You know, as soon as you see him, you're like, this guy knows what he's talking about. And you know, that's why Candyman has endured for as long as it did. It's Tony Todd's performance. He was so charismatic, and he was just a fucking force of cinema. And this gave it the best send-off for Tony Todd and this character to the horror community it possibly could have, I think. And I wasn't expecting that from a popcorn franchise like Final Destination, but I think they absolutely nailed it. And it made my heart swell up just watching Tony Todd, knowing that it was his last performance, and just that they handled it so well. I really fucking like what they did there. I had two main issues with this movie. The first half is full of cringy dialogue and character actions. Now, when I go in to watch a Final Destination movie, I'm not expecting Silence of the Lambs level dialogue, but some of the stuff the main characters said and did, felt like they were ripped out of like a 90s Nickelodeon straight to TV movie, and they made me wince. So that was a bit tough. Like, and even the way when our character Stephanie goes back home, there is like this really weird antagonistic quality she runs into with basically her entire family member that I didn't really have context for. Like when she goes to her cousin's house, for example, like every piece of dialogue is about 2 steps away from like, oh, hello, Stephanie, you fucking bitch, for no reason. And I didn't understand it. It does get better, but the first bit of that with the dialogue and the actions were pretty fucking tough. The second thing was the opening sequence and the inciting incident for this movie. It's on such a grand scale that they had to use a lot of CGI, and some of it's janky. Not all of it. Like, I actually did like the idea of the opening scene, but I probably much would have preferred if they made it less grand with the amount of people and pulled it back and had to rely on digital effects less. Like, because there are some really obvious, like, sort of green screen stuff going on, especially with, like, cityscapes and backgrounds and stuff. So if they... Yeah, I probably would have preferred if they'd pulled back, done some more practical stuff, and not had, like, made it a little bit more focused. You know, shoot it in a room as opposed to, like, this gigantic cityscape that they needed to pull off. But that being said, that happens. Those 2 issues that I had with this movie happen in almost every single Final Destination movie. So it's not untrodden territory for this film, and I think most people who are expecting a Final Destination movie will be okay going into this one if you're expecting much of the same. If you can stand that for about 30 seconds though, like when death really starts to kick in and the family really starts to work out what's going on, that is when this movie really starts to hit its stride as a Final Destination movie, and it's very clear that Zach Lipovsky and Adam Stein know what this franchise is about, and they know why we go to see these movies, and I think they really capture that in Final Destination Bloodlines. I recommend watching this if you love the Final Destination series. Like I said, this is one of the best ones we've had. All right, this is one of the best Final Destinations we've had 14 years after the last installment. It's pretty amazing they managed to pull this off. If you love Tony Todd, like most of the horror community, this felt like a really nice goodbye letter from Tony Todd to the horror community. They did it really well. There was lots of coverage on that he was quite sick during the filming of this movie, but he really wanted to be a part of it. Go see Tony Todd on the big screen like he deserves. He's a fucking legend. He's a legend of horror, and we'll all miss him. This is a really good send-off for him. I don't recommend watching this if you want something that's really scary. The Final Destination films don't really scare me because you kind of want to see awful characters getting fucked up in creative ways. There is suspense because you go like, oh, is he going to step on that? Is he going to do this? Is he going to put his arm in there? That's what it's for, but it is not scary at all. If you want an elevated horror experience, this is not that. This is rubbing 2 brain cells together. Go watch fucking Saint Maud if you want something like that. But, you know, I don't think anyone's coming into Final Destination being like, how can we break down this? And I can't believe this. They did this. What an amazing way to do. This is fucking Final Destination, all right? It's popcorn horror. We want to see people get murdered in fantastic ways. That's what it's for. If you like Final Destination and you want more in that vein, my first recommendation actually came out this year, and that is The Monkey by Osgood Perkins. It very much tackles the comedy of death like Final Destination does, and it's a far departure from his usual depressing spooky fare like Longlegs or The Blackcoat's Daughter. It's a movie based on the 1980s short story by Stephen King. It's about twin brothers who find a drumming monkey in their estranged dad's belongings. All of a sudden, after finding the monkey, they work out that people around them start dying in horrific and frankly comical ways, and they start to suspect that the monkey's got something to do with it, so they get rid of it. 25 years later, their hometown is plagued by a string of absurd, weird deaths, and the boys think the monkey's involved, so they return to try and stop it. This movie does comical kills better than almost anything I've seen in the last 5-10 years. Like, it's truly fucking hilarious. I found it funnier than Bloodlines too, because it's strictly a dark comedy. Like, the comedy is very much the core of the Monkey. So if you like the funnier bits of Bloodlines, definitely go in on the Monkey. Also, if you know Osgood Perkins' background with his parents and the awful things that went on there, it's a really interesting study on filmmakers and catharsis. For my second recommendation, I am sticking with the theme of outrageous kills, and I'm going with Terrifier 2. I'm pretty sure almost everyone on the planet at some point knows who Art the Clown is and has had a dalliance with him, even if it's not watching the movies, right? You've probably seen him in COD through skins, or you've seen posters, or you've seen TikTok trends with cosplayers. Art's become a phenomenon. Most people probably think of Terrifier 3 when they think of Art, but for me, when I knew Art was going to be a icon, was Terrifier 2. It's got one of the greatest on-screen kills, probably the greatest on-screen kill of all time for me. It takes place in a bedroom and it just goes on and on and on and on. It's fucking unreal. So if you do like the kills in Final Destination and want more like outrageous kills, Terrifier 2's you go. It's about it takes place straight after the first one. Art gets resurrected by a creepy child who's fucking awesome. She's like this weird clown demon thing. Love her. And he basically decides to go back to Miles County and continue terrorizing the town, where he meets Sienna Shaw, played by Lauren Rivera, and becomes infatuated with her. And it sort of starts like a deadly, blood-spattered game of cat and mouse between those two. It's fucking great. Terrifier 2 is really, really good. I think I probably liked it better than Terrifier 3, possibly. If you like watching a fucked up version of Bugs Bunny, Terrifier 2's your version of that, because the way David Howard Thornton plays Art, the kills are so over the top and so crazy. Like, you'll be watching this going, I can't believe I'm watching this, and how fucked up am I? But the way it's played, it's so gory and crazy that it pushes through the gross out into comedy. Like, I saw Terrifier 3 in a cinema and everyone was like laughing, even though the most heinous shit was happening on screen. So if you really like Final Destination series, specifically for the kills, I highly recommend Terrifier 2. That's it. If you have caught this movie, let me know what you think. What are your rankings of the Final Destination films? For me, it probably goes number 1 as my favorite, and then number 2 and Bloodlines tied. Then it probably goes 5, 3, then 4. I did not like 4. Fucking janky as fuck. But let me know your ratings, because let's be honest, Final Destination, it doesn't get enough love as being a franchise that we're fucking rabid for it. Like, horror fans, they absolutely swing out for the Final Destination series, even though I think it's across the board got like 5 to 6 on IMDb, but we love it. That's part of the fun. Hopefully I'll see you next week for another review. Peace.